There you go. Well, hello and welcome in to everyone who's coming here. I'm really excited to be hosting this day's Metagov seminar. Normally Val is hosting, and hosting it specifically as a collaboration between DSci Labs and Metagov. So a little introduction to DSci Labs for folks who don't know. DSci Labs is a group of people working on infrastructure for research that is fully open and accessible. They are focused on really bringing in and understanding how are we making research a more of a collective process and less owned by institutions. And so that's part of the conversation here. This whole series, this is the third part in a three-part series on AI in research and what that means. So we talked previously to David Sisson around how are we structuring our data for AI? We talked to Matt Akamatsu about how are we collaborating in an agent of AI. And now we're here to talk to Shiran and Professor Dudy about ethics in AI. There's a lot of additional things that are around AI. It's not just what it can do for us, but how that is done. And I'm really excited to be here at Metagov. The skunk works for the internet, to explore more about how we're doing, to explore more about how AI is a physical entity as well and a real life entity as well as a tool that we can use. And so before I pop it over to you, our speaker for the day, I am going to just ask Val, do you have any short additional housekeeping things that need to be noted before we begin?
No, just welcome everyone to Metagov seminar, and like Lee said, in partnership with Future of Science and DSci Labs. So nice to see many of you. If this is your first time at a Metagov event, we do these weekly seminar presentations. And so you can view our schedule on our Luma calendar. We use Luma now. And yeah, we have lots of other events, seminars, as well as more informal community calls to have discussions and sort of user testing and peer discussion sessions, and book clubs and fun things. So, like Lee said, skunk works of the internet and a great community to be involved in. And if you ever have questions about it, just reach out. My name is Val. I'm the community lead and get involved. But it's lovely to see you all here. Thank you to our speaker. I'm looking forward to your presentation. And Lee, back to you.
Sweet. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to pass it straight to our speaker for the day. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Ellie and Val. So let me just see if I can share my screen. And I'll be happy to, let's see if I can. Okay. Cool. So it seems like I'm sharing it, which is great.
Yeah, it's all working on our end.
Awesome. So hi everyone, I am Shiran. I'm a research scientist at Northeastern University. My focus is on responsible AI. My background was heavily grounded in developing language models. I started my PhD in 2013 when language models did not mean what they mean today. They were very small. Just as an example, a project that I was focusing on was essentially helping people with severe speech language impairments to use a speller system or to spell out what they wanted to communicate with their interlocutors. So imagine people with locked-in syndrome or ALS, where this device can be helpful. And so language models can just help you predict the next word, together with the brainwave that we would take from them. And so now it's a completely different, like these are large language models. They they draw so much attention. They have been deployed aggressively, I would argue, in the US and beyond. Um, and over time, I grew critical of who they serve and how are we using them. And so this in this context, I over time learned that well, it's great to develop those things. Maybe we should start guardrailing them and turn to auditing them and see what are their limitations and create discussions around those topics. And now, and auditing gradually led me to consider ways to create accountability for the harms they cause. And in this talk, I want to share and focus our time in emphasizing what, from my vantage point, what are ways we can create awareness and accountability. So we start off by defining risk, which is the possibility of loss, injury, or other negative outcomes resulting from an event. But essentially, harm would remove that word of possibility. It's already things that are causing a loss or an injury or a negative outcome. And in this review, I will look at risks, but harms as well. In addition, just to kind of frame the context of harms and risks that I'm going to focus on, these are immediate or present risks that we're talking about. They're measurable, observable. We can see that they are the here and now. This is to set aside risks coming from other communities looking into existential risks and machines taking control over humans or long-termists. And so I'm not focusing on that today. It's just this one that I'm going to cover. Those harms and risks are fairly broad, and they touch different layers of society. I'm going to kind of go through them briefly, so we have a shared understanding from, again, my point of view of how we view those risks. I also would say they are not exhaustive. I do know that there are some risks that I didn't add in, but for the sake of brevity, I covered those. So talking about individual level, this you can imagine when you are interacting with a system, what are the risks you are under using LLMs, in ChatGPT, and similar. So this is essentially a list that I'm not going to read out. You can just and I might give examples for some. So maybe you've noticed that those systems are designed to make us believe what they're saying. They are kind of showing that, like, create I'm always not saying it correctly, but let us believe that there's a human on the other side. If someone knows how to say it, you can jump in and say it yourself. But letting us believe that there's a human outside, on the other side, can be done through sophisticated design decisions, such as you see like those three dots that let you think that the system is thinking right now, or something. It is computing right now, for sure. But there is a sense that if it is being typing a word by word, that really imitates something very familiar from how we operate. There are some ways in which it chooses not to communicate that an uncertainty when it responds to queries we're posing. There's always like maximum confidence, but notice that if you challenge that confidence, it is likely to be pleasing as well. I do want to say that sometimes there are pushbacks, but oftentimes it will do as we please. And you can imagine how ultimately the set of behaviors manifested through those systems essentially also impoverish relationships we have with other humans, simply because They would just do as we want, as we tell, as they think we would want to see them behaving. And that is um, putting us at risks with forming new relationships or maintaining relationships. So the risks on the communities level goes into how different communities are represented through those systems. What is their knowledge? And some of those communities may choose not to be there, which is good, which is fair. They don't want to take part in this game. But like what type of information we are fed that teaches us about those communities can be put into question. But given the sophisticated design of those systems, we may never recognize that. And so another question that I would say, if you happen to speak a different language than English, it is a question how well, when it speaks to you, this non-English language, it might be fluent, sure, but how well does it manifest the social norms of the particular community and society this language is mostly associated with? Or rather, it is providing you or manifesting social norms that are actually not part of that community. And one risk that can come from there is that over time, using those systems by that population may cause identity erasure, simply because they would just learn social norms that are not inherent to that particular society or community. Talking about specific sectors, if we talk about the labor sector, job displacement because of AI is prevalent. We're talking about creators or artists or publishers whose data is being scraped and basically killing their livelihood. Yeah. On the government level, we are at this point in the US, and I'll make the reservation also later on that the focus of this talk is the US. Happy to hear diverse life experiences of people here outside of it or inside of it to the degree we want to share. We, like in Europe, the Digital Service Act has started creating a code of conduct limiting disinformation and misinformation. Whereas here, it's actually here to serve the administration. And so that creates erosion in trusts in the institutions. Well, which is not to say that only AI contribute to that, of course, but it's definitely not helping with that. Yeah. On a society at large, we we find it hard to understand the reliability of information we are served with. We are gradually, and at this point, fairly well into the algorithmic filter bubbles. There is no intent and it already started happening prior to Gen AI. I would argue search engines already served you with filter bubbles, creating those gradually reducing empathy and shared understanding among citizens, residents of here, of other places, about how we view reality. Even if we are in post-modernist kind of society, there is room to talk, to create bridges and validate other people's experiences, rather than letting you believe that what you get is what everyone gets in terms of results. And then looking odd at people who actually share with you a different experience than yours. Um, so future generation, we're talking about environmental impact, um, reduced trust, um, epistemic environments that are not reliable. Yeah. And also, what kind of skills we're going to teach them if we rely on AI for everything. So, what do people think here? A recent Gallup survey showed that Americans prioritize AI safety even if development slows. 80% of them prefers that, suggesting that safety is likely having a high consensus. Pew Research Center showed that 50% of Americans are more concerned than excited about the increased use of AI in daily life. About half say AI will worsen people's ability to think creatively and form meaningful relationships, tying back to end user harms that we saw earlier. This is an interesting one. And AI experts more likely than the public to say AI will have a positive effect on the US over the next 20 years. And I think that this is you can argue that the public is not well informed, but you can also just listen to the public and act upon like what taxpayer this what are the sentiments of the taxpayer, rather than listening to AI experts that of course they have conflict of interest, and of course they want to preserve their status. Yeah, only 17% of US adults believe there's a positive effect, will be a positive effect over the next 20 years. So what happens given that sentiment? You would expect to see something going on. And so one thing that started off not badly, I would say, that was in 2022, the AI Bill of Rights, and that one set the stage for looking into core tenets of what we should guard against when we talk about AI systems. So safety and data privacy and discrimination and different things. And this was a starting of something that looked promising. There comes the new regime where we essentially were almost facing a 10-year moratorium preventing any legislation on a state level around AI to protect the state's residents. And that attempt with the big, beautiful bill did not pan out. But instead, current administration is looking to block states who are looking to protect their residents in the context of AI. And so if that didn't pass there, lawsuits look to hinder efforts around that domain. And even more so, a summit that I believe was during that last summer in Paris, where J.D. Vance carried a speech talking about, also for context, we're going to go political. I'm sorry to, like, these would be areas which it's not about stating my view, it's basically making observations about what happened and reviewing what has been going on. And there, it seems like the current regime would reject creating sustainable and inclusive AI. That's not part of the agenda. The agenda is just innovate and don't regulate, because regulate means losing. And this equation seems to be speaking to many people, where I would argue that regulation does not necessarily hinder innovation. That's for a different talk. But that's what happens in the halls of power. So what are means to create AI accountability? And here is where maybe some silver lining happening, or some positivity that I can share. Coming back to the different circles we described earlier on the individual level and community level. So here is an example for a community-led AI audits. So Consumer Reports is a nonprofit that exists from 1936 and looks to assess products for the American people, focusing a lot on cars and other types of products, but recently also looking into digital services. And so in this one, there was an audit of Instacart, where they were able to show this was like a group of volunteers across different states who shared their data and were requested to share the data about a particular basket of purchase through Instacart. After all this analysis, they were able to learn what are the different patterns emerging when assigning market prices for different products, learning that there was variation of 23% between the cheapest to the priciest basket. And these are things that you can only do when you band together. And so that is one example. This is Consumer Reports and Groundwork Collaborative that led the initiative. Another one was led by a different entity called Etikas Foundation. Their goal is to audit, their sole goal is to audit digital services, and in this case, ride sharing in Madrid was the main question for this report. They were looking into different neighborhoods and looking into how accessible, what is the availability of those rides from those affluent and less affluent communities, eventually finding gaps where there's a limited availability and longer wait time for less affluent communities when they're looking to order rideshare services. On the government or public institution level, there is IAAA institute that, or consortium or association, that is now in its early days. It's Internal Association for AI Auditors. And I personally am a member. That's like kind of main focus. Like I am doing auditing for my day work. And so these are currently working groups that look into create an occupation of that is called AI auditor. These auditors ideally would be placed internally and externally to a particular company and would have enforcing power. I mean, will be able to be domain specific. So healthcare and education would require them to go through different qualifications. And the idea there is that they would be, at least the external one, would not be subjected to any party and would provide as an objective review as they can for the different products of those companies. And if they violate those standards, there might be further actions that can be taken. because the current landscape of auditing is fragmented. I personally am also a consultant doing services for auditing AI products. And currently, it's this type of dynamic is I am consulting to this company, and there I do have incentives in place to get this company coming back. And I also there's not so much I can enforce. It's only if I can, and I also typically don't have access to end users. And so it's like it's very limiting. There's no standardization, no best practices. It's Wild West, and there are many companies out there. So I would argue that if you trust this entity to audit your products, great. At least you can make a step forward, but it wouldn't be more than that. Simply because, again, no consensus at this point. My vision for auditing and community bending together is described here. Um, what I envision is that, say, if we have a ride-hailing platform or any platform for the sake of this argument, they will provide service for users. Users can opt in to share their data with AI auditing experts, different experts. If like, and ideally, there would be like a cohort that would aggregate enough data to understand patterns. This would result in a performance report coming from those auditing services, auditing experts, directly towards users, but also to the regulator or government. And then civil society can choose its next action, which is, well, if we find discrepancies in what we expect to what we are being served, there could be boycotts. But if we find violations of the law, there could be some other more harsh actions, potentially in litigation. The participatory turn, additional ways to create accountability. Normalizing the idea that, well, now if we have AI, we can also scale up things that actually benefit the public, such as participatory design, where now a recent paper demonstrates how employing participatory design improves science, and how we can learn more from listening to the people who are closest to the problem. Another take to discuss participatory design is with Taiwan, that we know has been practicing PD for its Uber services, as an example, learning from communities on the ground what they feel about having Uber basically getting access to the Taiwanese market. That series of participatory design held with Polis arrived at several understandings between that the government later on adopted on what would be the terms of those Uber drivers, and rights and obligations. And so when you collaborate, you create trust, and less resistance when you arrive at decisions in participatory fashion. So for specific sectors, when we look into, and I would also apologize, there's no way I can provide or address every type of limitations I presented out there. It's just like a flavor of things that there are ways to make step towards accountability. So around data ownership, radical exchange, and open mind have been presenting possible solutions to those publishers whose livelihood depends on publishing their craft. This actually directly speaks to the sentiment that I imagine Metagov, given the series and topics that Ellie shared, has to do with banding together as a collective and putting all your craft on those servers. So a bunch of publishers would get together, put their publications there, and have this layer basically protecting those servers from scrapers. And beyond that, requests would be kind of a paywall for end users if they choose to get access or subscribe. And that's how they can restore their livelihood, as they would now have greater power, negotiation power, by basically being able to earn a living on what they're doing, because they now grew to be something that is powerful than the divide and conquer that was easily done with AI systems, as they easily scrape their data. In addition, probably preaching to the choir, looking into healthy and sustainable information ecosystems is also a way to reduce maybe exposure to undesired and toxic information systems. And also, like, for instance, choosing DuckDuckGo over Google would limit the times that AI is being called to generate a response to you, kind of reducing your exposure to responses coming from Gemini. So that's another thing to think of. But those other decentralized platforms are kind of the better alternative right now that we see. In addition, again, around accountability, we can look into, and I'm really close to wrapping it up. Advocacy groups are an effective way to fight harms. We can see that New York State already determined phone-free schools law. I know it's not AI exactly, but this is related to the aspects of just being immersed with technical devices throughout. Let kids go grow phone-free. New Jersey also had a unprecedented legislation around nude images, and data privacy and AI legislation also making progress in Massachusetts and California. I will also say that one thing that I've been working on is a tech policy tracker, with the idea of those different advocacy groups need to understand what is the current landscape across the different states. If they're aiming to create an impact that goes beyond their own state. So the idea in this type of tracker is that you will have access. So currently there is a search engine to search for different legislation on different related themes. But in this mock-up, you will have better understanding of all the different legislations that are happening on certain states, and how do they fare with others, and what kind of insights and loopholes happen to be in one that can be mitigated with another. So this mock-up is fairly simple, but the idea is that there would be a story to tell about the current state of the matter around a particular theme. So everyday people, but also advocacy groups, can get insights and alerts on different updates that happen in their states or in others. And so this was what I wanted to share with you, and happy to hear thoughts, and thanks for listening.
Totally. Thank you for presenting. Yeah, I'll leave it open to folks. I think my First questions, thoughts. I know like you were saying a couple of specific things. Something that I've been stuck in a little bit is the act of like transforming the idea of like, yes, these are the things I can do into like what's your first step? So I'm wondering like if you can like do a little exploration on first step and then see what other questions bubble.
Like, would you kind of, are you asking, now I want to get involved somehow? What can I do? Is that the question or a different one?
Yeah, now I want to get involved slash like first step towards like supporting AI that I would actually like to be involved in type of thing.
Yeah. So, okay. One thing that I hope to like, I have a vision for is to so I don't have an immediate answer for what we can do right now. And maybe there is something that pops up to someone in there and they are more than welcome to share it like here or just comment. Um, but I do envision that we are forming um, groups that can or community-led audits where we decide what are our values and we share our data and we share it with someone who we trust and analyze the data and tell us whether we are getting the quality of service we are interested in or below that and we act accordingly. So that's what I and I and I think there is just it is very powerful when you do it in a group that have shared interests, such as consumers. But maybe, of course, there's other types of groups that I am not thinking about right now, but like that's kind of what I envision to happen. Yeah.
Can I jump in with a question?
Jump in.
Hi, that your presentation was amazing. I love everything that you're sharing and the way you're thinking. In terms of like the community-led audits and types of communities that could do that, I've been trying to think about how local communities can all of these AI issues seem so like both online and so kind of global, but like how can our local communities, friends, and neighbors come together and think about these issues and how they're going to directly affect us, how we can get ahead of issues as well. So not just responding. And so I hadn't thought about the kind of responding to kind of AI tools and giving input on how they're working or not working for our best interest. So anyway, but I that could work, and maybe there's ways to do that at the like geographic community level. But curious if you have any other ideas or examples or thoughts or vision for how kind of geographic communities can come together.
Um, well, I want to say yes, but I think it's challenging. I think okay. I do think there are ways. I mean, and I might be also interpreting your question too literal. Let me explain. Um, Many American cities are so I think that banding together on a basis of geographic location um, feels like a very natural and organic thing that should happen. But I feel like now we're tapping into a greater problem than AI, which is how do we create those places, sites for people to see each other and 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 meet up and communicate. One thing that I find that is missing in the US when I compare it to other places is the lack of third spaces to create spontaneous interactions and kind of people who I might say hi to But eventually, really check in on when something happened, and that creates resilience in the community. I mean, unfortunately, we see it in a greater extent only when we face atrocities. And I'm really exaggerating here, and I know I'm wrong, and I'm generalizing. But it is inspiring to see what is going on now in Minnesota. You read all about how they are sharing and helping and detecting. But I wish this was more of a practice that has been out there before. Than just like response to something, to an atrocity that happens. So I don't have an amazing answer right now, but I do hope to create those more third spaces one way or another, um, where we live. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question as well. Um, Thank you for the illuminating talk. I was wondering if you can elaborate more on the conflicts of interest with regard to like the auditing or like the auditing techniques that you're conceiving of, and where like in the specific conflicts of interest that you can identify with them.
Yeah. So what I meant by that is that it's not about necessarily compromising the methods that I apply when I audit, and do it as a consulting service. Is that I personally have an interest that the company that I'm auditing their product to would return next year. And so I feel like I might not really go down on them, even if they did, like, because I might not benefit from, future long-term kind of vision of how sustainable my business is. I mean, I'm not running a business, but there would be lack of incentive to provide complete objectivity when you audit things. Whereas if there is a third party who might not be of risk of being fired or not being contracted with, there might be a greater incentive to, here's the skill set I was taught when getting my certification to audit your, language tutor, and I'm just applying it. And this is the report. I'm kind of using this best practices and standards out there, and seeing what the outcome is. And maybe it's horrible. And unfortunately, if it is horrible, you might be really needing to do something about it. But right now, it's like less likely, given the type of dynamic that is manifested here, to just see these things happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because one thing I was thinking was like technology such as zero knowledge privacy or and security and differential privacy, so that the identity of the auditors and perhaps even the organization or company can be obfuscated, but that the auditors can still deal with the information that they need to audit in like a legible way. And that if there was like a rule in place, perhaps for like these AI companies to have auditing done, then like that would ensure that the companies were or the models are regularly audited, but that there wouldn't be any compromise on either end of the parties of the two parties.
Hmm. I mean, that could be an interesting, avenue to look into and think about. We also need to kind of audit the AI tool that is planned to be auditing what we want. I can see how it can be easily hacked, which is not to say that humans cannot be hacked or gamed or kind of, Um, but yeah, I mean, and also, yeah, currently it's not like at this point in the dynamic is not that I'm not aware of what is the name of the company. I know exactly what company I'm auditing to, and so it's like, and also, but yeah, I mean, maybe it like for external auditors, um, maybe not knowing the name, there also it could pose a trade-off because sometimes um, it's not the name, but it's actually the actual activity. You really need to know what they are doing, in under what context they operate, in order to know how to, beyond the standardization, curate exactly the type of auditing questions that you want to pursue. So maybe, sure, we might be able to obfuscate some of those identities, but in some ways, it's also inevitable to get access to them, to get a greater context. So yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Totally. I,
Hi.
Patcon, I'm going to go to you after maybe Leticia, and then Esra, are you also on Stack? Cool.
Yeah.
Leticia, I saw you had a question in chat on AI auditors. Are you able to unmute, or would you like me to read it?
I can unmute, but I also appreciate you reading it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I guess the question was, are AI auditors using specific frameworks to guide audits, and does it look different in the US versus outside of it?
Yeah. So at this point, the focus of the interest groups. Okay, so generally speaking, I believe anyone can join those interest groups. They have made progress around creating guidelines on what certifications what does certification looks like, and how do we, again, go domain specific when we look into providing the right accreditation to do that. I believe that only California has been seriously considering promoting legislation around this type of occupation so far, but there are efforts across different states. And so I guess that coming back to your question, I don't know if I answered that, but like it is still something that is in development. And ideally, it would might have like state specific requirements because we know that at this point legislation on tech is left for states to determine, but ideally there would be something on a federal level. Nothing to hope for that soon, but potentially later on down the line.
Uh, yeah, I was looking for something a little bit more like if you were following like NIST, AI RMF, risk management framework, or globally ISO 42001. I understand California does have the CPRA and the CCPA, and I do like the fact that you can get around the federal block by putting in AI governance or AI regulation within these privacy rules and laws. And a lot of other states do have privacy laws on the books. But yeah, I was more interested in, is there like a framework that your organization is using or following as the standard?
Or even just maybe perhaps principles that are guiding the way that these types of audits are being conducted. You
Yeah,
know, at one point
I'm
we
more.
word
Yeah.
values a lot, but maybe principles would be better in this case.
Yeah, I definitely think if they didn't have a representative from NIST, they read through their guidelines and looked into incorporating and getting inspiration from what happens there. I'm happy to share with you like what I've been exposed to, if that is helpful. Yeah.
Be
Thank
cool.
you.
Cool. And then Patcon, I think you're next.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Shiran, this is super neat. I'm trying to my context is I was trying to I participate in a weekly community where like 50 to 70 people we get together and just kind of do project things. It's ostensibly civic tech, but a little bit more, someone last night pitched something called the Council for I don't know, making more fun in the city. Anyway, it's just civic projects. And so there's a lot more AI use, particularly around agents. And so I might have a little too much of an agent frame in my question, just acknowledging that. Because it's kind of like allowing people to do more, but also making a lot more kind of lone wolf sort of like it's hard to, I don't know. I think I'm just curious how communities learning to use these new tools together might fit, like communities that already are kind of doing work together might kind of be of service to kind of the way you're thinking about this. And maybe this is a little separate thought. It's that like an audit, I don't know, just I'm like, no, I'm like the word audit, it's like a kind of institutional self-reflection. It's like, it's kind of this process that we have at our personal level. And I'm just kind of trying to reconcile, like, it's like audit is a term of these larger things, but almost it feels like these tools are almost allowing individuals at a personal level to have just whole infrastructures that like almost seem or start, like one person has essentially a whole kind of like almost like a company infrastructure that is increasingly at their like service. And yeah, I'm just curious if there's like other frames than audit that might align or work and like connect more with how people are kind of are coming into their lives.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just threw a few random things. If anything fits.
Yeah. Well, yes. Like there are other words that people have been using. I would say those words often are called benchmarks. Are you familiar with that word in the context of AI evaluation? And of course, AI evaluation. So the benchmarks has been growingly kind of associated negatively because there's lots of criticism against benchmarks and leaderboards. If you are familiar with that term, Kaggle leaderboards, and in the context of benchmarks, the criticism has been mostly around they are decontextualized from their original environment, and so someone determined that this is a benchmark everyone needs to aspire to, and that means that the system is safe to use if they reach that threshold. But essentially, it was not grounded in real context, and so sure, like others, like there were people who wanted to present that their systems also meeting that requirement, but essentially that was the problem. But it's not to say that people cannot use the word benchmarks or evaluations. It's just essentially a different word to describe how we assess performance of a particular system in a specific context. Often, I guess that maybe auditing brings the association of something that could be violated or something that has to do with policies. I might be wrong though, but like it gets away a bit from academic circles towards more kind of like auditing, I think is very common in banking. And so maybe that's why it's not like an appealing word to use. If there's something else, go ahead. Let's talk about let's talk about those ideas and use them if they, ring better to people. So, but yeah, there was another question: how community can benefit using AI. I feel,
Plug in
I mean, sorry.
thinking. Yeah, if someone is in a space where I think we have values aligned with like these frameworks you're talking about, and we meet every week and we're starting to use these tools, like, is there a way? Like it's kind of not a lot of neat interlocking pieces when you have people in a community learning to use these things or who together. It's not just random people across a city or across a country. It's like people who are actually kind of working on shared goals together. And yeah, I'm just wondering if that like is a resource that like could. I don't know. Yeah, if there's any opportunity for like if someone is in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have something coming to mind, but I would say use them. Like, I think that if focusing on the human-human relationship, like maybe I know and I have the skill set, but there's another person who is interested and curious to know, like, doing kind of sessions together. focusing on us and having that augmenting us, but not replacing in a way. But that's very much like, you can take it to wherever you want. That's my personal thing that guides me. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Cool. I'm passing to Ezra.
All right. Hi, Shiran. I was just kind of curious about like the background, like behind the curtain, kind of what goes on before audits. Like kind of, it's like a two-part question a little bit. What
Yeah.
exactly is the kind of way that you approach these companies, and like what do you say when you're like, okay, how do you go into these companies essentially and just say like, okay, we want to, do this audit, or like how long does it kind of take? I'm just curious about like that kind of value proposition, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then also, how likely is it that those AI audits will become like an industry standard in the future? And like what would be the steps to get there, I guess?
Yeah, good questions. So for the first one, I mean, how do they find us? I mean, I would say there are many other companies out there, offer Orca, and well, I don't have in mind so many names, but even at the level of enterprises, like I imagine that IBM and Microsoft are also offering services that are similar. I think it's similar to how every kind of company entity finds its own users, but it really means that the company who's interested in contracting with you cares about it, and that's why you typically would just help people who already kind of have that sentiment of I want to work towards responsible AI. In that sense, it is also it is positive in the sense that if you find some ways that are harmful and that or limitations in like also coming back to the values, we're sitting with the company CEO and talk about what are the values that you care for. Is it fairness? Is it robustness, reliability, provenance? What are the things that you find relevant to your product to be under? Based on that, that's how we operate the type of tests. But the positive part there is that since the CEO or the company leadership is already presented interest in creating more responsible products, there's higher chances for them to take seriously the report we're producing, follow through, look into mitigation. Whereas if we were just like, imposing ourselves on someone who is not interested, there's like really, I wouldn't see any good outcome from that. But if you have your power to enforce, violations of particular rights, and you are a third party, then it becomes with more teeth, as they say, like that. Then whether you want it or not, you will comply, or cease to exist. Yeah.
True, true. Okay, cool. Thank you. I was really curious about the background of all that. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we are at the end of the hour, so I want to make a huge, huge thank you to Shiran for coming and giving us this presentation. And I don't know, I'm excited to see a couple more resources maybe drop into chat, and more questions followed up in the Metagov Slack.
Thanks so much,
Thank you,
Ellie, and
guys.
everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Roasting Lee.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.